to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Erika Keough. Erika is a second-year student in our Executive MBA Class of 2023, and she and I recently connected to talk about her MBA journey, as well as her new venture, a people and talent advisory and consulting service for early stage to Series B startups. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here is my interview with Erika Keough. Erika, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
Well, it's great to see you. How is everything?
Things are good. I mean, we are about to, hit exams in Q9 here. So home stretch, we're seeing it. It's right there. We're in elective land. No, things are great.
So give us just a little bit of a flavor of the electives that you've been taking as of late. It's always fun to hear what students get into.
Yeah. So I got into entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship thinking, which sort of fits with what I've been doing the last 6 months. And timing on taking that elective actually was spot on. I've continued some of the leadership classes that we started as part of core. This quarter, I have leadership coaching, which is actually turning out to be super interesting and a very difficult skill to have, but I think also really important as you grow as a leader. And strategy. So wrapping up a strategy execution course. And I was headed towards more strategy and then completely just changed my schedule just 2 days ago to include actually a lot more tied to venture capitalists. So venture capitalist leadership, and then also entrepreneurship finance, really thinking this is my last opportunity to understand how to structure my business and probably get all the help that I can without just turning to a CPA or something like that. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Let's start by talking just a little bit more about you. So tell us about you and what's your background?
Yeah, thanks. So, I grew up overseas. I'm French originally and moved to the United States in my teens and grew up in Arizona. Did my undergrad at a small liberal arts school in Texas. And, slowly but surely made my way out east. And I have been in the DC, Northern Virginia area for over 25 years. Along the way, got married, had kids, and stayed working. And my entire professional career has really been in talent and people, talent acquisition for many years, and then pivoted about 7 years ago to lead the entire people function. So HR, talent acquisition, talent management, talent development, benefits, comp, all the good things. So all of it in tech. So caught the tech bug when we moved out to the DC area and have stayed in tech. So I worked for everything from startups to much larger enterprise companies. And, I've been both an individual contributor and took a step back after I had kids, though I'd sort of risen the ranks, so came back and restarted and then led teams across the way. So I'm really passionate about people and their stories and their growth and how to make them succeed within an organization. And I think I've seen, certainly I'd say in the last 10 years, sort of an increase in the desire by executive teams to have that people function, have a stronger voice, really be able to drive a lot of the business decisions, and certainly has been validated as part of the program. The people function is a key strategic part of a really successful business. And so there's a lot to do, and it's not just policies and procedures. So it's been a great growth journey. I love what I do.
So how did you discover that you were passionate about people and the human resources, people function of an organization?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know that I would have called that out early. I certainly wasn't calling it out in college. I was actually pre-med for 2.5 years at this small liberal arts school. Decided halfway through my junior year, this isn't what I was going to do for the next 10 years. But I think, really interested about the people side of medicine more than even the clinical side. And so I had been interning for a staffing company and took a full-time role with them upon graduation. And then when we moved out to the East Coast, specifically got into recruiting and tech recruiting, which I liked a lot. Tech recruiting is a lot like sales, at the pace of which, especially in tech, is very intense. But I sort of just really liked bringing people and talking about their stories and matching them to potential needs that a company might have. And I worked both on the agency side and also in-house at companies when I first started. And then, as I grew into roles in leading talent acquisition teams, it's a very different skill set inside of the people function. Sometimes misunderstood because it doesn't really focus as internally. It's really focused on grabbing people externally, to some extent, selling them on the opportunities of a company. So, that's how I got into it. I think I would say haphazardly is the best way to put it, as is actually pretty typical of a lot of recruiters in the end. I think what made me pivot into more of the HR and the people side, as I referenced about 7 years ago, was just a desire to say, will I only ever do the talent acquisition, which is, again, just one piece of that function? And is it time to look into doing something more different? And so I actually went back to school at that point and followed a certification program to receive my HR certifications. So kind of got interested in going back to school already. That was like a little bit of a tidbit into that. And then that's when I knew I really liked the whole function. I liked doing more than just talent acquisition. So.
How did you discover that you wanted to do an MBA? Is that something you had always thought about? Was it a recent idea?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I'd wanted to do an MBA kind of in my late 20s. And I was already married at the time, and I was doing very well professionally, running entire talent acquisition teams. And couldn't quite figure out how I might take off 2 years. The Executive MBA program, I think, was just sort of a newish thing. I'm not even sure if Darden had one then, but so I was really thinking about a residential, but almost would have fallen outside of the range of a typical residential. And so between, how would we pay for this thing and the time and taking 2 years, I just kind of potzed around in it and didn't really ever follow through. And then started our family and one thing led to another. And when you have 3 children, I couldn't quite imagine going back to school and doing it. And it was about, it was in 2020 during COVID, when I was head of people for a company that had employees in 37 countries. So it was definitely a very, very, very intense time. And having conversations with our CEO, we were leading a lot of talent development initiatives internally, not only to keep employees engaged during a sort of a downtime, if anything, but also just to keep them engaged with the company because everyone's focus was just everywhere else. He turned to me and he said, I'm not hearing you really tell me what you're going to plan for yourself in terms of learning. And so it was interesting, and it really got me thinking. And he said, will you always just be head of HR, or will you ever run your own company, or like, what are you thinking? And I just hadn't really thought about it in many years, actually. And so a couple conversations in, he really said, I think you could really benefit from an MBA. And so I know you do all these things for the company, and I know you're extremely busy, but I will stand by you. Go get into the best MBA program that fits you and your life and your family's life, and we will figure out a way for you to have the time to go do this. And so then I said, you know what? There was really like no excuse at that point. I knew that COVID pending, I would have some of my oldest children in college, so somewhat out of the house, and so so that's when I started the search and briefly looked at a few options, but very quickly really narrowed it down to Darden. And it was because it was local, the majority of the classes, the weekend classes being in Roslyn. But even if we needed to be in Charlottesville, that's close enough. That's not that far either, versus, other schools where I might be flying either every second or third weekend. And I was already traveling for my job, and I just could not imagine taking on more of that. But so I felt like the scheduling made sense. I also really like this emphasis on general management and nothing really too, I knew that we'd have a lot of comp classes, but not too many necessarily, not a huge financial or consulting super angle. And I was really blown away by just the caliber of some of the current students that I spoke to, and then a few of the online classes that I popped in. One was taught by Yale. It was a decision analysis class, and I thought, I could kind of do this. Like I kind of answered the question, of course, not well, but and so anyway, it gave me enough of a confidence to figure out that I could. I went and studied for the EA, which was a process in itself. But did it, and I wanted to kind of do the test and feel like I could, get in with some sort of testing and scoring, and then applied, and then the rest of the history because you're the one who called me and gave me the good news. So.
All right. So it sounds like it's something you had thought about for a while. We share with prospective students that it's not uncommon at all for executive MBA students to have thought about the decision to go back to school, to pursue an MBA for several years, and in some cases, maybe even a decade or two. We've absolutely had that experience with executive MBA students. At the time, it was that, okay, initially thought about it, and then, okay, a lot of life happens and they come back around to the idea. It sounds like that was your story.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, I as we're about to wind it down, I mean, it's re-energized me professionally in ways I would have never believed. I think it hasn't just been about what I've learned, that's obviously a huge piece of it, but it's also, giving me an opportunity to share the many stories that I've had and a lot of the experiences which my classmates have really valued. And it's not just the conversations inside of the classroom and the case sort of correlations that can be made as part of this discussion, but it's even the conversations that take place on the breaks after or the dinners later that night, where where there's a continuation of that experience and the share out and the introspection almost that comes from the decisions made at that point. And it's just been an incredible journey. I think like many classmates who enter into the program, we think back of LR1, which is that first week in Charlottesville, and oh my gosh, like who wasn't scared those first couple of days in the classroom? But I was mostly just scared that I just didn't think I was going to fit, and was I going to be just too old for this, or like would I even know what to do in the classroom? It has been so long since I've been in college. And I mean, of course, all that stuff goes out the door immediately. But the sense of belonging happened very quickly in LR1, like that the voice of my functions, so the voice of people, is actually a very, very important piece, and it's very weaved in to many of the classes that we have in the program. So there's always an element, either through the case method, where you're sort of doubling up on, learning about the stories of things that happened with the companies, in addition to whatever, core subject is being taught. There's always an opportunity to sort of peel back the layer on the stories or the history of the decisions that were made by leadership, or, the course of event that took place, that I find fascinating. So it's felt like my life has been that, and then being in this program has sort of amplified that even more. So it's been fantastic.
You mentioned the sort of energizing nature of the program. Is it that really that sort of social element, the conversations that you're having, the relationships with your classmates? Do you feel like that's really what's given you that push?
Yeah. And, I think I've said this, and this has pretty much happened every single OGR. The in-person OGR for me are just a huge boost. It's the week that leads to OGR, these on-grounds residencies. You are reading a lot of business cases, especially the first year when you're tied to core classes. And there's a lot of preparation, sometimes some cramming in, but okay, a lot of preparation for the 7 days leading to that. And then for me, it's like the skies open up, because the learning and just the opportunities to be live with folks has been amazing. I have a little bit of a harder time with the night classes because I'm usually working off until the 5 minutes before I get to class. That's my schedule. That's just a function of my life. And so, and it's kind of the end of the day, and it's more, wound down, and the energy is different from when you have students that you see on video versus seeing them live, and seeing the expression and seeing who's really taken back by a comment and who would, stand to have additional conversations later, or the professors and the way that they interact and how they move the conversation around in the classroom. So, I think, by the end of the day, Sunday, I think everyone's a little fried is the reality, but it has been so great to really not only meet in person, but for me, it's that personal connection, those personal stories. And there's such an incredible variety of backgrounds in the classroom. I never, ever would have guessed. It spanned from, doctors, some of which are doing a second residency while doing their MBA, folks in their geospatial specialists. I don't even know how to describe what they do. I mean, everything. And of course, consultants and policy makers and things like that. But such a breadth of backgrounds, frankly, that some of which I'd never been exposed to that level. And yeah, I mean, the stories are just really, really incredible.
Did you expect to have that community experience as part of your Executive MBA program?
You know what? I didn't, and I'm not sure why I didn't. I mean, I knew that I would sort of probably create this network of 140 people, but I've also have like a lot of other networks, right? And I talk to candidates all day long, so I talk to people all day long. And I'm a parent, so we have all of the friendships from as a function of friends and sports and all the many aspects. I also just didn't feel like I needed to have another network like that. But it is today, I think, a network that again has propelled me in a not, I feel like, a different direction, but with a stronger sense of purpose. It's been a bit fresh air, just to an extent, for me, seeing frankly, younger women in the program who are doing it all, who are on the cusp of about to want to do it all, and just asking for additional feedback and being able to provide some of that feedback. I think, as we have, people that experience all types of personal journeys while in the program, including having children, which I think is incredible when they're doing that. Men and women, right? So men becoming fathers as well in this program, but all of it is a real testament to growing leaders. I think at the end of the day, I went into the program thinking I wanted a lot of the quant. I wanted to, I'd started to be included in the board meetings and meeting with external vendors and investors. And as a function, I wanted just a little more depth into all the financial components of running organizations. And I wanted just more strength and bench behind it. But ultimately, I think Darden grows leaders that make decisions that are based on the data, so the analytics and the quant, but also, share in the reflection of true ethical leadership that is, not just necessarily for short-term gains, but has long-term impact and really drives us to think about those decisions. So it's fun to really watch others also experience that journey and that discovery and that challenge for themselves. And it's also challenged me in some of those same ways as well. So
you come to Darden, you're a first-year student back in school. What was the biggest adjustment for you, or what are some of those things that you had to work through in the first few quarters of the program?
So, probably right away was our learning team. So our small group of, 5 additional folks and myself. I just didn't, I'm a pretty strong, independent person, and I just didn't think I would be relying on others to go learn. It's not how I learned in college, for sure. So I didn't really completely understand the concept. I might have been a little skeptical, and I was also like, who are these people and really why are we all together? Anyway, very quickly, I came to not only work with them really closely, but rely on them, frankly, for additional support and And truly, by the time we were in some heavy quant classes, additional learning that I really needed to have, or just additional ability to have conversations around some topics. And it greatly helped me tremendously. I had no idea, really, frankly. I do remember, meeting this team at LR1 and with various degrees of preparation, all 6 folks, and kind of thinking like, oh, we're kind of in for it here. Like, what are we going to do? This is going to get really interesting really fast. And I think by the 3rd day, we had some video to create or something like that. And I mean, we were rolling on the floor laughing. I hadn't laughed that hard at that point in several years. And I remember turning to one of them and almost crying because we were just goofing off so much around whatever we needed to do. And I thought to myself, you met these people less than 72 hours ago, and here you are, and how is this even happening, right? That learning team has turned out to be not only a really close, close group of learners with me, but a close group of friends, really, in the program.
I appreciate your point about the learning team. We always tell prospective students that you might have known prior academic experiences as something of a solitary activity where you got ready for class, you came to class, you studied for the exam all by yourself. That is not exactly the experience here at Darden. It is much more team-oriented than that, to your point. And I think it can be challenging for exec students to kind of let go in that way and accept other people's help and recognize that you can't do it all by yourself. It's a pretty motivated group of people. That's not an easy thing to acknowledge, but nor should you try to do all of it by yourself.
That's right. I mean, I think it was probably by Q3 or Q4, so pretty close in, where there was still a huge element of just me still picking it up by myself. We were still reading all of the cases. And then at some point, I just basically said, like, I give up. I can't do it all. And so I'd rather show up prepared and count on others to, read through the cases that others have prepared. And then we just kind of do a quick share out before we meet on ground. So yeah, it was definitely a process to learn. And I think, I think folks, though all very driven and all very focused on making the most of this program, have different learning styles as well, right? And so it isn't just a function of age necessarily, or the kind of degrees that they've had. It's also where life has taken them, right? When some of the folks are truly at the leadership level, at the executive leadership level, and are being asked to make a lot of decisions based on input, it's not quite the same thing as learning with others. And so learning to kind of unpack that and take the goodness that can happen in shared learning. As it was a great, it was definitely a learning experience, but was a great one, and one I very much support today. And I'm actually trying to implement in small ways with some of the professional teams that I work with today.
Well, let's talk about your journey in the program a little bit more. During your time here at Darden, you decided to launch your own venture. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so that was an interesting turn. I had set a couple goals for myself in the program, which was really mostly to just get challenged and take my former CEO's suggestions into hand and just go do this and see where it takes you. A couple of months after starting the program, I actually decided to leave the company I was with, and I took a little bit of time off. I also experienced some personal challenges, and so took some time off for the very first time in my professional life. So probably well overdue, certainly after COVID, very needed. And in that 2 months, I was reflecting and starting to interview for companies, and I reconnected with somebody that I worked with a couple of times, and he'd recently joined a startup as a COO. And he said, listen, we probably can't afford you as a full-time employee, but hey, like, what are you doing? Do you want to do some consulting work? And I said to him, well, I've never done consulting. And he's like, well, like, what's stopping you? I said, well, I don't know, but okay, fine. I mean, I'm just looking for a job. I'll do this for, 6 to 8 weeks. So I start, and it's a startup, so you need to do everything in a people function, right? And And I'm kind of going along and actually having a lot of fun and really helping them. And I can tell sort of making an immediate contribution. And we then, I think the timing was such that we started Pack 2, which is the professional development course, which had, I think for the first time in the Darden program, an opportunity to choose like 9 different tracks. Anyway, I select a coach, a professional coach, and the other one that I do is this entrepreneurship thing. And it turns out the entrepreneurship piece is led by a guy at the Batten Institute who leads iLab and all this entrepreneurship stuff for both residentials and full-time MBAs. And we meet with these teams about people who are interested in startups, people who have already done startups, people who want to know more. And then as we get to talking, he finally turns to me and he says, so like, what's your deal? And I said, well, I don't really know. I'm just here listening. And he was like, well, but what about you? Aren't you consulting today? And I said, well, yeah, I just started, and he was like, isn't this what you could do? And it was just like it hit me out of nowhere. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I could do this. And I had thought about doing something like this like 10 years ago. But again, life took a different direction and I didn't. And so, and I kept on coming back, to Jason at Batten and saying, I don't have my business plan together and I don't have financials and I don't really know how to go price this. And he said, well, did it stop you for the last 8 weeks in doing this? And I was like, no. And anyway, so then next thing you know, I said, but I don't even know how to incorporate myself, whatever. And he said, you've helped so many people in the last year with, how to rebuild their resume and talk about their life story and figure out what they want to go do and create networks and introduce them. He's like, why don't you just let the network help you? And so I kind of did. I put out like, hey, clueless one over here looking to do a couple of things. Who can help me? And within 2 days, I had one of the attorneys in the program help me get incorporated. I had somebody else create a financial plan and then I just happened to take one of the first elective in entrepreneurial thinking. And day 1, you need to show up with your 1-page business plan. And week 2, you needed to have your 24-month run rate. And, week 3, your go-to-market strategy and all of your market analysis. And so basically, it's sort of one thing led to the other. And so today, the business that I started is pretty specific, but actually has a very niched market, which is, supporting startups, specifically seed to likely Series B, who don't have a full-time resource on the people and talent side, but yet as they take on additional funding, need and are being asked to do some things around talent and either replacing talent or aggressively, growing headcount for scale, and cannot necessarily afford a full-time resource. So as I'm doing today, I'm basically a fractional chief people officer for a startup. And then I have advisory practices. So I have a talent acquisition practice whenever we need to turn on that faucet on doing some recruiting. And I'm soon to hire an HR ops when we need to just crank on policies and procedures. And then I sort of handle everything else in between: talent management, talent development, employee relations as it happens. And then helping them grow, with wherever they are, which is, I think, the also sort of challenging story for startups, is understanding what's appropriate for them at their stage, what makes sense, how much do you invest, especially in systems and processes and additional headcount. So it has been joyful. It has really also re-energized me, I think, in a way, because when you work for a startup, every day is different. Every day brings something exciting. And I really just enjoy supporting that end, but also knowing that it's my business too. So, likely I think it will be about helping companies through these 12 to 18 month stages, because that's usually the typical stages of fundraising, and then moving on, helping them recruit their next head of people or head of talent, and then moving on to the next customer. So pretty quickly here, it's also about aligning with VCs and sort of maybe being a go-to partner for them as they take on additional companies with portfolio companies. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. The world that I really didn't know that much about before Darden. So
sort of opens up the next question I was wondering about as you were telling your story, Erika. If you had to go back, if you were to cast your mind back to 6, 7 months before you started the program, when you were applying, so would you have been surprised with where you are now and what you're doing?
So much, so much. I mean, there's a lot that happened also in that period of time, personal tragedies as well, which have also helped me to put things into context in a very, very different way, right? And then also that, you know, when Jason finally turned to me and said, well, if you're not doing this now, when do you think you're going to ever do this? It was a moment in time in saying, listen, you've done all these things, but maybe it's time to pull it all together and really figure out what could be the next exciting thing. And as one of the leadership coaches helped me also figure out, it's not just out of a sense of duty for everyone else and for everybody else that you always do these things for, but really for yourself. Which is not how I entered the workforce. I entered the workforce because you get a job and you just continue to go up and you just continue to churn, right? And then you get to the top, and if it doesn't bring you joy every single day, then there's more to life, and it's time to go figure out what that is. And I think that that's one of the things that sort of unraveled in both some of the leadership classes and Pack 1 and Pack 2 inside of the program. But also as I was coaching others in the program about what it is that they wanted to do, I was like, okay, well, you're asking a lot of people these questions. Are you asking this of yourself, right? And part of that introspection and reflection component of learning, which is also something that I didn't quite understand when we were first talking about that as, being introduced to that concept in the program. At some point I really turned the light on myself and said, it's time to just do this thing if you're going to be serious about it. So, yeah.
One of the things I was struck by with your class is particularly early on, I would go to homeroom, which is the time for announcements during a weekend residency on that Friday morning before class starts. And there were a number of classmates who would say, I'd just like to thank Erika for all her help with my recent job transition, or I was working on something at work and Erika was really helpful to me. How did you get pulled into working with your classmates in this way? Did they just pick up on, oh, you're a people person? Let me talk to you, HR expert Erika Keough?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely that element. And I think, we start out in sections. And so you really get to know your broader section of 60 or 70. But very quickly, I helped in career services and became a career services rep. I think I've also provided a lot of feedback. I'm a pretty big believer in the experience. So in this case, the student experience, and the recognition that people make movements a little bit differently than as part of the residential program. And so, when I could pretty quickly come up with what my pitch was or these things, others kind of said, well, can you help me? Guys, sounds like, and I was like, yeah. And this is talent acquisition has been in my blood for 20 some years. It doesn't go away. And I actually love it. Like, I love helping others figure that out, and very quickly, then you also, there's a reference to an HR policy and an HR process here or there. And next thing you know, whether it's helping a classmate with, their spouse's FMLA leave or something that they don't understand, and just getting clarification. Yeah, I think the word spread pretty quickly. But I'm thrilled that I've had that opportunity. I find a ton of joy in supporting people that way. I think most recently I helped a lot of folks as they were, not getting great news about being impacted by reduction in force and just making sense of what was being presented to them at a time when for them that's pretty stressful. I think in any way that you can help others, that's always been part of my big mission. And recognizing and encouraging people to also take advantage of this network of 140 people that we have. So go ask the questions of folks, right? You figure out you have an interest in maybe doing something in pharma. Well, go talk to these 3 people. I think what I quickly figured out is who's in what area. And so being able to reference others, I think today, 20 some months into the program, everyone has kind of figured that out. But early on, others didn't quite know as quickly. So yeah, and I mean, look, I think, at the end of the day, if I will walk away with some very personal accomplishments as part of this program. But I would love nothing more than others to feel that way. And if they were just helped a little bit along the way to get there, then I'm better for it. I mean, it's just Darden's better for it. The whole thing is better for it. It's life. It's a circle of life, and it's been a fantastic way to give back.
Well, do you have a favorite memory from the program thus far?
Favorite memory. I mean, I think, the learning team is probably that, and this video that we made, which was a spoof on The Office. Again, that had us like rolling on the floor. I think it's the people, I hate to say it like that, but it really is. It is the people. I think a lot of the events that have also happened outside of the classroom, whether they're social events, and we've had this amazing woman in the program who's put on an incredible amount of social events on Friday and Saturday nights. Some of the Friday Night Lives, where we've had some incredible speakers, some of the, like winery tours and other little trips that we've done. The events and the people that are not necessarily part of the classroom experience.
The thing that I always try to share with prospective students, and may not be obvious, because I think when you think about an executive MBA program, your attention naturally goes to class, right? You're thinking a lot about class. But the weekend residencies, there's so much more than just class. We just did a blog post not so long ago about a running club that sprung up in our first year class, Executive MBA Class of 2024. I know there's been, I think, sunrise yoga in y'all's class on Sunday mornings. There's been all kinds of clubs and organizations that have sort of sprouted up. There's all the sort of social activities, some planned, some much more improvised as the weekend goes. I mean, it is a full experience. Residency, I think, is the right word for it.
Yeah, I would agree. And also I think, we're so close to DC. So for some folks that are not in DC, it's the opportunity to sometimes go to a museum. And so they ask a few others, hey, do you want to join? And you're like, yeah, I haven't seen this museum in 10 years. Sure, I'll go. And the next thing you know, that turns into dinner close by. And so, yeah, some of the things planned or unplanned have actually been great. I mean, we're in a great city for that, in a great area for that. So.
We were talking with some of your classmates about how there is this kind of campus experience embedded within the weekend residency. Students stay in the hotel. They walk together, typically one block to the space in Roslyn. They're in class together. They go out to eat dinner. They do all these things in DC. Like DC is effectively the campus, and it creates all kinds of great opportunities. So what do you think has been the impact of the program for you, Erika?
I mean, I think the greatest one, as we've already kind of mentioned, was almost a reset button. That's maybe the word that comes to mind to kind of articulate almost the pivot. It's not a complete pivot in that my day, roles and responsibilities, quote unquote, are not that different. But the way in which I do it, and certainly the joy for me, the internal joy and energy that I have felt, as well as obviously feels stronger in some areas, especially the quant stuff, where I just didn't quite feel so, level-headed about before. I think I certainly today feel I just have a lot more bench and strength too. I think that's it. I think the other impact is it's almost taught me like the sky's the limit. I was almost reaching this point of like, well, what am I doing for the next, I don't know, in my case, it's maybe the next 15 years. But now it's more of like, what am I not doing for the next 15 years, right? And so it was an opportunity to reset with a huge amount of positivity and drive and re-energizing a lot of the passion that I think I bring to teams and people and companies, and seeing the goodness in that again. While having, strengthen all the financials and all the operational parts of business today.
So what's next for you and your venture? What are you looking forward to in the months ahead?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, next week I head to Morocco on my second global residency. So that's that. Super personal for me. I was born in Morocco, so it's the first time I'm going to go. It's just going to be it's going to tie a lot of things together. So I'm really looking forward to that. And, and then we have our last quarter and LR2. And so things are winding down, but like, oh my gosh, things are winding down. And then, graduation is bound to be not only, I think, special for celebrating this accomplishment, but in my case, my oldest is a fourth year at UVA undergrad. And so he and I will walk the lawn together in May, which I've got to believe is going to be special. So there's some really great things. For the business, I think, for me, I will be hopefully working through my current startup and taking them to their Series B. And so it probably will be the end of working with them and starting another new venture. So that could look really different. And I do think I'll pivot at that point to bring on team members to my own company. So that's sort of expanding and doing some things a little bit differently too. So time for a little bit of scale, manageable scale, and seeing where that takes us. And yeah.
Well, that's so exciting. Particularly the graduation point, to have the opportunity to graduate in effectively the same class as one of your kids. This is an incredible thing.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So.
Well, last question for you, Erika. What's a piece of advice, something you would encourage our prospective student listeners to keep in mind as they think about their own MBA journeys?
I think, I don't know that I would say I was afraid, right? But it did take the CEO a couple of times saying, you haven't followed up with me. You haven't told me, I was like, well, I'm just not sure. And I don't know. And I wasn't saying I was making excuses, but maybe a little bit. I hadn't quite done the research. And then finally, one day I said, just stop, do the research and figure out why you're thinking that you're afraid, but yet you've wanted to do this for a long time. And then just do it, I think, ultimately, right? So I am so much better today for having done this program. A small part of me says, well, what if you had done this 20 years ago, right? But 20 years ago, I wasn't the same person professionally and personally. So the context by which, I interacted in this program would have been different too. So again, you meet yourself where you are and you go on this journey, but pulling the trigger, doing the application, turning it in, committing to it once you are into the program, is the one piece of advice I would give. So do the research, figure out which program, works best for you for as much as you can find out about it ahead of time. Ask the questions for sure. And I think Darden does a fantastic job of providing many opportunities to see what the program is like. But then pull the trigger, do it.
Well, Erika, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so happy for you, all these great things. Excited for your venture. I just love, we talk with prospective students all the time, and they ask questions about what will life look like as an executive MBA student at Darden? And the best thing, I think, and it's maybe a little bit unnerving, is it's kind of unknowable. You just have to take the leap, and there's so much discovery along the way. That's the best part about it.
That's it. I could not agree more. Take the leap and allow yourself to go on this journey, right? Without necessarily all of the answers. And just see where it goes, right? And how much you can take from it. So pleasure to be on the podcast, Brett. And great to see you.
And that was my conversation with Erika Keough, a second-year student in our Executive MBA class of 2023. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA@darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.